Good evening. Just gonna do a little warm up. Hope you're doing well. It's a bit snowy night. Day. It's evening now. In Kitchener, lots of snow. So we're gonna warm up a little today, doing basic range of motion. Also a nice review of what our joints actually do. And by taking everything through its basic range of motion, we're gonna help lubricate it, increase the synovial fluid, and help loosen it up, hopefully, a little bit before we get into Yoga Nidra. So I have my little cheat sheet here just to try and make sure I don't miss anything. And I will try and make sure that you can see. It's not the best view here, but anyway, we'll go from here, all right? So standing, so in anatomical neutral, our feet are kind of straight. Typically it would be like this. And we use this as a beginning place to reference when we're making the movements. Okay, so flexion, extension. So we're going to start at the shoulders, shoulder elevation, shoulder depression where it comes down. So elevation, depression, and this is actually the scapula moves as well. Of course, this is an important part of the shoulder girdle. Then we have shoulder abduction and shoulder adduction, or we say GH joint, abduction and adduction. And the shoulder also does circumduction, like the hip. These are interesting, fascinating, slightly different kind of joints, and also explains why they're prone to injury, because there's so much phenomenal movement. And then we also have external rotation, where we're rolling out, internal rotation, where the humerus is rolling in. So external rotation, internal rotation. People often have some sort of restriction there. And then we have shoulder flexion. So at the GH joint, where we come up here. All right, and shoulder extension, straight back. Flexion, extension. So it's movement over here at the shoulder. Then we have scapular retraction, which is when the shoulder blades move back, trying to meet in the back, and then protraction. Retraction, protraction. Moving on to the elbow, we have elbow flexion, elbow extension. So basically your bicep curls, right? So when you're coming up, it's a flexion. When you're coming down, it's an extension of the elbow. And then moving to the forearm, okay, so in anatomical neutral, we're already in supination, right, where we roll out, supination. And when we roll in, it's pronation. Supination, pronation. And then we move on to the wrist, okay, so from anatomical neutral, wrist flexion, using the flexors to extend up, right? Side, and then extension this way. And again, it can look like this, is extension, because we're extending, shortening up the extensors here to extend the wrist. All right, and then we have spinal flexion. So think about the cat and cat-cow in yoga, right? Spinal extension, so the spine is kind of moving back and forward. In the spine, we also have lateral flexion, right, where it's just a side bend. So spine can move beautifully, and we definitely want to keep that up as we get older. Then we have spinal rotation. We'll do a couple of those because they feel good. All right, and then we move into the hip. And here we have hip abduction. Oh, I should adjust that. So hip abduction, where we go away, adduction. Abduction, adduction. Abduction, abduction, adduction. So abduction is when it comes out, adduction when we add it to the center line. Okay, and the hip also does circumduction. We'll do a little here. And on this side, again, we're getting the beautiful lubrication of the joints by running through the range of motion here. All right. Let's see if we can do this. So hip flexion is here, and extension here. My fancy pants. Hip flexion and hip extension. And then we have knee flexion, knee extension. I jumped one here. Knee flexion, knee extension when we straighten it out. Okay, sorry, rolling back to the hips. I forgot external rotation where the foot rolls out. Internal rotation, foot rolls in. External, internal. You can do this with the knee bent. External rotation, internal rotation. External rotation of the hip, internal rotation. And then we have, at the pelvis, also does some movement. So we can do, there's an anterior tilt or a posterior tilt. Anterior, posterior. People get into trouble when this is, sometimes the muscles pull it out, you end up with back pain or ab pain. All right, so ideally you want the pelvis to be fairly neutral. And again, you want to make sure that you are able to do the range and that when you're standing, posture-wise, that you're stacking these areas one on top of each other. All right, we already did the knee, flexion and extension. And then we're finally going to go down to the ankle and look at ankle dorsiflexion. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Dorsiflexion, toes come up, and then plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. Dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. And then the foot inversion is where the soles come in, and eversion is where the soles of the feet roll out. Again, inversion, eversion. Inversion, eversion, inversion of the foot, eversion of the foot. Sorry, my video is a little challenging. So that's the basic range of motion for all the major joints of the body. Really good to do this anytime, and every day would be ideal. It's part of the reason that yoga is so good, because usually a good sequence will take pretty much all your joints through the range of motion and keep things lubricated and the tissues happy and healthy, and ideally keep you more mobile. But that's the movement for today. We're going to move into the Yoga Nidra meditation next.